think a common answer is probably like, is it spring 2028, getting into the halving? It's kind of hard to argue with that. Like, I don't know. I don't know if we have enough to run up. Like Warsh, I would say this. So with Warsh and his initial press conferences, he doesn't seem like he's taking or expects to take drastic action on the Fed cutting rates in the US that could drive liquidity in the market, and Bitcoin's still so liquidity driven. I just don't know if he's going to be acting and making 50 basis point cuts at a pace that's going to be that fast that's really going to drive it. You also have Anthropic looking at their IPO, OpenAI IPO. So those are going to pull a lot of liquidity out of the system as well. So I think it's going to be, I think for those reasons, those three reasons, that's why I would have a hard, I just don't expect it to happen 2027. But then 2028, by spring, I think we could see, I don't know, like back to all-time highs. Maybe by end of 2028, we're like 150 or 175.
Hello everyone, this is the Bitcoin Libertarian. Our guest today is Jody Flournoy, co-founder of 21 Rates, the hub for Bitcoin for personal finance that helps people compare lending, custody cards, inheritance, ETF, and more with transparent data. He's also co-host of the Daily Stack, the live weekday show covering Bitcoin, stocks, and AI with the people actually moving market. Jody previously worked in institutional sales at Prime Trust and co-founded Blockfuel, and he's based in Bend, Oregon. On X and on the show, he digs into Bitcoin treasury strategies, tokenization, digital credit, the real estate Bitcoin overlap, and the emerging world of agentic system. Today, we are going to unpack his path into Bitcoin, what 21 Rates is building, the biggest debates in the Bitcoin economy right now, and where he sees the next wave of opportunity. Jody, welcome.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. It was a good meeting in Bristol, UK for the Smarter Web Conference, or the Unconference UK. Oh, perfect. Yeah, you got the shirt on. I know I need to wear mine as well. Yeah,
Excellent.
Absolute pleasure there, and excited to be here.
Thank you very much for being with us. And the first question is the same that I do to everyone. Jody, how were you orange pilled?
So I was orange pilled. So 2013, I heard about Bitcoin. It just went to $100, and it was a friend of mine that had, I think, bought a few, and I thought, oh, it went from $1 or not, a couple pennies to $100. It's already passed. I've already missed the train. It's gone, right? So people say that about everything, about like NVIDIA or Apple or Google or, some of these like transformative technologies. And it's a lesson of, if it's the right technology, if it's the right company, if it's something that's truly revolutionary, then you can still be very early, even if it's already grown significantly. So I passed it up in 2013. It wasn't till 2017. I was working in the Bay Area in San Francisco, California, in the tech scene and working at a few startups, and just learned, through conversations with people and reading, and probably on X and Twitter about Bitcoin. And, there's curiosity there. And that's when like the price started to pick up a little bit. And price is it can seem like greed in some regards, but price is also like, in many ways, like a market's like a pure example of somebody voting, oh, this is valuable, right? Like this is interesting, this is valuable. And it prices in so much of like the risks, as well as, there's also like potential upside. And so, number go up technology, whoever coined that, I can't remember who it was, but that is part of it, which is like it gets people attention if it is volatile, if it moves quickly. But it means that smart people, likely, or dumb people, think there's a ton of potential, in what it can do. So I think price probably got my attention there as well. So I started buying Bitcoin in 2017, and then over time you get in the community, you want to support Bitcoin, you want to learn more about it, and that's where like the why behind it really filled in later. And I think it's good to explain that, because it helps you think about like how to talk to other people about it in a way where I didn't come in knowing Bitcoin was the best technology and that it was going to be transformative. I didn't have a ton of money at the time to go buy millions worth of Bitcoin. Like I had to start DCAing and stacking. I was like expensive city, and I was, in my 20s working. So I think it's not like coming at from like a wealthy perspective where I could just say, oh, I'm going to make a very smart, intelligent bet of $10 million into Bitcoin when it's cheap, and suddenly I'm a billionaire now. No, it's a lot of conviction, a lot of holding. I've never sold since 2017, even though it's been tempting to do so. I think there's been altcoins that have been super interesting, but I think that's even more the compelling story is like seeing other technologies in the same way you get curious about those, but then learning through like reading and learning through seeing what other altcoins are doing. And Litecoin, Charlie Lee, the founder of Litecoin, sold it all at the top, and Litecoin's still around somehow. But it just seems like every situation with Ripple or any other altcoin, like the money printer and the ability to increase the supply and dilute everyone else corrupts everyone, right? So you need every government, encounters, most of the same type of corruption of deflating away everything. So what we've seen is, or inflating away everything. And so I think what we've seen is that was the orange pilling itself, was seeing all these altcoins and like what happens and how that relates into governments and how they, manage money as well.
Yes, I like a couple of points that you said. The first is like you mentioned the price. Most of the Bitcoiners says price is not important, and I think that price is important because it's a signal that the market receives a voting. And for people who is not yet into Bitcoin, price is the signal to go in. Usually, people goes in when price goes up. So all this time that we are living, where price is probably lateral and not going up, most Bitcoiners say, no, 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 I want it to go down. And I say, no, because we need more people to come in. So we need to go to another all-time high. So people can come. And the other thing is, I like your point that you enter in this knowing nothing. So all of us entered into Bitcoin being totally newbies, being people who don't understand technology, probably don't understand how money system works. And through Bitcoin, we learn it. And that's the important thing.
Yeah, it pulls you in and understanding it, right? Your money is trading your time, trading your life, right? For value, and how much your life and the time that you spend in it is valued, and it affects everyone. And so I think understanding money, and not from like a growth stock, Wall Street finance perspective necessarily, but purely just from like what is money, monetary systems, monetary debasement. It is something more people need to know, and don't even need to understand like the deep math behind it. You just need to know like basic psychology and incentives, and it explains a lot of how, if a government's incentivized in a certain way, and it's not clear of like what's happening with the money supply in most countries, right? Like most central banks can do what they pull certain levers, and even the U.S. public and other countries, they don't know what's going on. They don't see the bond purchases in the same way, or they don't see the repro like programs transparently. It's not very clear. So it is something, very critical to learn. And then the part on the price, I think, is, I love the meme. It's like it was somebody's comment. It was funny. It was like, oh, like you see that earnings report? Yeah, it's priced in. Oh, did you see like that CEO is going to kill another guy? Yeah, that's priced in. Oh, you think that like robot technology is going to happen? Priced in. My wife cheating on me in 10 years? That's priced in. Everything's priced in. And it was different words, but it was funny because it like in a liquid market, everything does get priced in. Fascinating to me, and we talked about this at our meetup and with some friends last Friday. Like, was Cold Card priced in? Like, that seems weird, but it's also weird that there just wasn't any sellers left. So, like, I think people should know that it's such an informational signal of sentiment, but also of just information that's happening live with the Bitcoin price, because it trades 24/7.
Yes, totally agree on that. And when you go into Bitcoin, as you said, you don't have to understand money a lot, but you understand how money works. That is something that probably 80% of the people on the world don't understand how money works. They don't understand why the prices goes up, why their salary can buy less and less month by month. And when you go into Bitcoin, finally understand more than a PhD in economics from Harvard. I think I said I understood how money works when I studied Bitcoin, even though I'm an economist. So that's a big thought that Bitcoin did to me. And let's talk about your projects and what problem were you trying to solve when you co-founded 21 Rates?
Yeah, great question. So before that, 2022 had joined a company, Prime Trust, and what Prime Trust did was a custodian that worked with a lot of consumer apps. So they worked with Strike and Swan to hold customer funds, to connect to banks, specifically in the US banking rails, so that they wanted to onboard someone as a user. You could come in and put your debit card in or connect to your bank and pull in dollars to go buy Bitcoin on Swan or buy Bitcoin on Strike. And provided that for a broad number of companies. So it was like a Series C, 180 employee company. And I joined and I had a few friends that had worked there, and it seemed perfect because I was like, oh, I'm finally getting to work in Bitcoin. This is exciting. I had come from the payment space from a Visa portfolio company, so I understood payment rails pretty well, data security well, how credit card networks work really well, and so we started working at Prime Trust, and it was a good experience in the industry, but massive failure as well. Like not to the level of like FTX, but what had happened is they were dealing with an old system. They raised money, and so they were trying to move from, now they had a little more money and engineers moved to a more robust wallet system, moving to Fireblocks, which provides some custodial wallets that you can plug into their software. So they had an old system that they were using with hardware wallets, and so they had a 5 of 7 multi-sig, and so a bunch of these individual hardware wallets that you could use to spin the transactions at the corporate level. So not the best thing to be doing, not the most robust system. So they're moving to Fireblocks, which is much better, but they didn't change the address, and so they were taking in different assets for clients. One of them is Ethereum. So the Ethereum address was not changed. Ethereum kept coming in, and they didn't verify that they were sending it to the old wallets that they didn't have access to. And so 83 million in Ethereum is just bricked up in these wallets that nobody can spend and nobody can access. So massive hole in the balance sheet where it was just poor management and poor like risk management of checking every quarter, every month that they can spend from every single wallet. And the company went bankrupt. It was a big scandal of like, did somebody take the keys themselves and now they're going to go spend it in 10 years. You can still see it on chain, which is interesting. Part of it is you could still see it. But it was a big catastrophe. And, Swan was in the news, Strike was in the news, a lot of these other customers, Binance US was one of the largest customers. So major issues there. And so me and my team, like if I was institutional sales, like we were talking to, new customers about coming on, and we were kept in the dark, and most everyone lost their job, or everyone lost their job. And so that was like, that was a tough experience. And it also showed and gave us a really good reason to want to, push transparency in the industry, help people. Like people always say, don't trust, verify. But where do you go verify? I think we've even found out within Cold Card, there's not a lot of good free resources that the average non-technical person can go in and do, or even have the time to do. Like it takes a lot of work. So that's where we started 21 Rates. It was like, look, let's start like there's like a site, NerdWallet or Bankrate, where you can shop housing mortgages and auto loans and in the traditional finance world. So we're like, let's do something like that. That's like a free consumer site. Check out Bitcoin lending rates, Bitcoin cards, custodians, exchanges, ETFs, just anything in the Bitcoin economy. Tie some culture in there, but for the most part, we want to do Bitcoin financial services, and it's been a ton of work. It takes a lot of time to build organic traffic, to build the website. We try to be like very transparent what we do. We try to be very objective in what we do, but there's going to be areas where we're not perfect. So eventually, once we're bigger, we don't have funding yet, but once we're bigger, we want to hire more writers that can come in and bring some different perspectives. But it all came from that big experience of going through a bankruptcy, working at a company that was going through a bankruptcy, and the lack of transparency. Everybody was trusting that they were doing the right things, with the keys themselves, and they weren't. And we want to help people avoid that. I'm not necessarily saying we would have, dug in and found cold card bug like nobody did necessarily for years, but at least want to have people as informed as they can be.
Yes, building organic traffic is a really tough job, but once you build it, it's like an asset because you have it without. It's not like paid traffic that you pay, you get the traffic, and if you don't pay, you don't get it. When you have when you have organic traffic, it's like forever. But I want to ask, this is not a Bitcoin related, more a marketing related question, is how do you deal now with all the advance of the AI? Because you have your site. I think that you have the CEO, you have a constant people coming, but how do you deal now with the AI? Do you use AI for writing, for editing? And of course, how are you adapting the website for AIs that needs to read also the website?
Yeah, phenomenal question. So on the first part of how we're using AI, very much like have leaned heavy into it. I think a few parts we've even started like doing a show, or like we don't do it every week now, but doing a show on AI and how people can be self-sovereign a little bit and explore local models. But for the most part, like we're using AI internally. Really love Hermes agents. And I started with OpenClaw in January, February, got really into OpenClaw agents, and then shifted to Hermes agents March, April timeframe. And it's been an amazing experience since. So now we have 3 agents. So right now that we're working with, 2 of them really internally focused. One of them's part of a new product, but they're incredible. Like it's able to use something that when it's not something that needs to be subjectively like written, like it's not like a review, but if I need to like go find data for something, it just can do it around the clock and it never gets tired. And it can just every single day go find, certain pieces of data, but also be intelligent about it and pull in like different links and everything that really helps like what a research analyst could do. And so that saves, I think, and could save a lot of people just like the ability to scale with minimal funding. And so I think properly using these like really good autonomous or mostly autonomous agents, like Hermes agent in my case, has been a huge help. So we do that for like a lot of making data validation and data checking. And then as we think about the site itself, that's actually been a shift that we did starting in May. Was I think right around the time we met in person, is really shifting our site to be for structured data, for answer engine optimization. So when you go Google something, what happens? Is ChatGPT citing you? Is Perplexity, Gemini, Claude, or any of these models actually citing you? And are you putting yourself in the best position to do so? So we rebuilt a lot of the site so that we could provide good objective information for every company in the Bitcoin space. So I think we have 443 now, and getting good information so that we can say, okay, this is the loan rate for let-in. This is a loan, or this is, the trading fees for an exchange like Swan or River or Strike. And over time, it's going to take a while because they're not going to cite 21 rates overnight, but we've put in the work, 3 to 4 months ago to really optimize for all of that. And we're starting to see it where we're getting cited more, which is cool to see. So we're getting more on that side. So we're actually doing a big tool or building out some services around that, like helping companies get AEO optimized.
Yes, we need to adapt all the world for AI because now it's and you have 2 options now. There are the people, you see the meme of the guy on the bus, that one is looking at the river super happy and the other is looking at the mountain super sad. Some of the people say that they see that no, AI is coming to take our job, it's going to destroy everything. And other people say, no, AI is going to revolutionize the world. And I am one of them. And also, I think that there is going to be an intersection between AI and Bitcoin. And how do you think that this intersection between AI and Bitcoin will bring to what is going to bring to the world and to humanity?
Yeah, I think I'm an optimist as well. It's truly, I think, continues to bring so much, even outside of work, right? The average person doesn't need to be like spend so much time being an expert in every single thing. And I love just around the house, I can get more stuff done if I just take a picture of like a broken faucet or, uh, something like, oh, like I've had this stomach bug, I got this virus and it's been horrible this week. And then so I'm asking it, hey, I ate these things today and I should be good. And it's like, yeah, but you ate too much dairy. You had a protein shake. And so like that is probably, that's why you don't feel good today is because your stomach's not ready. Like it adapts to so many variables that like the traditional web doesn't. And then you can get these like just incredible being like, hey, here's my 10 ingredients I have in my fridge. What? Give me 5 recipes to make. I do that all the time. I love cooking. And so I'll be like, what can I make with these 5 things? And it just gives me info so that I'm not wasting my time researching it and like not spending time with, a kid, or my wife. So I think it's incredible. My wife actually works for an AI company. So she's obviously very bullish on it, and they've done very well. But the thing I think with Bitcoin is it's a dichotomy of like Jeff Park, that used to be at Bitwise, pointed this out the other day. There was a potential investment in like I think Korean government or Korean, I don't think it's the sovereign wealth fund, but the Korean government was looking at investment in Samsung or SK Hynix, essentially backstopping these AI companies. Very similar to how the U.S. government, with Intel and looking at some of these other domestic producers of chips, because we've had this conflict between China and Taiwan, and what's going to potentially happen there. So the U.S. is looking at it from a national security perspective. What that changes is suddenly, if like entire governments, entire countries are investing in AI in private companies, then suddenly there's no stopping how much money they can print, put into it. There's not like the market forces aren't going to be natural. The one mistake I made was doubting the money, or not the one mistake, I've made plenty, but one mistake that I did make in 2020 was like, oh, COVID's happening, everything's locking down, every stock's going down. I didn't realize the power of the money printer. I don't think a lot of people did. But when that happened, immediately everything shot up, like just ripped incredibly. And it says, don't fight the Fed. And so I think in the same way, you could have 1,000 Michael Burrys that are trying to fight the Fed and short, the AI bubble. But if they're backed by the Fed or backed by any national government, the bubble for AI continue for 50, like maybe not 50 years, but for another decade. And so I think that is very realistic if we see more governments feeling like it's a national security issue and they need to pump their own, they can print money and then they name it some program and it's some strategic investment fund and they pump it into these AI companies and keeps running. So what that means, dollar debasement, currency debasement continues even like a more rapid pace. And so Bitcoin, I think, having hard assets has to pull that back because the average person is going to be negatively affected by that, especially those that don't have any hard assets, that don't have a house or real estate or anything of value or, equity positions in any of these companies.
Yeah, most of the thing that the thing that I think is that AI is bringing to the world the costs to zero because it takes the productivity to infinite. Again, as you said, I can do many different tasks now. I can send the person to research data that on the other side probably you should have hired 3-4 person to do the same
Yeah.
job as an agent do and more efficient. And all with this cost coming to zero, Bitcoin as a hard asset is like, I think that the anchor is like the connection with the real world. So that's what I think that Bitcoin and AI, I'm so bullish on that because it's gonna bring super prosperity for the future of humanity, of course. as you said, people that don't have hard asset now are gonna be in a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even anywhere, it just raises the stakes where I think, like you mentioned, Thailand, there's only so many people that own, buildings in Bangkok. And if there's like a finite amount, and it can't, even with AI, you can't increase that in the same way. Like there's building materials, there's time, there's cost, there's zoning. Uh, but like with AI, with all this like software, and everyone can spin up a website, and anyone can create content in some ways, then you need to have like fixed things that just are hard to do, and that's why I love, like, recorded stuff, live stuff, is because it's so hard to fake that.
Yes, I love doing the live stream every day. But yes, you said you cannot build more buildings with AI now. But imagine when Optimus come
Yeah.
in the future. In the future, Optimus are gonna be building everything with 3D printers and all the things. You're gonna go from the design to the execution with fully AI. So that's why, for me, the cost of everything is going to go to zero, and Bitcoin is emerging that this real hard asset based on energy that if you don't have, you're not going to have a good time. And talking about 21 rates, who is the core user, and what's the long-term vision for the platform?
Yeah, a core user now would be someone that currently has Bitcoin. We do have some beginner stuff on the site, some educational resources. We'll point people towards a lot of different books and podcasts and other resources. But primary person now, someone that has Bitcoin, that's looking at a Bitcoin loan, that's borrowing against their assets. They need liquidity, or they're looking to get a card that gives them Bitcoin back when they go spend. And inheritance is a big thing we're looking at as well, is the ability to like pass down, and the different options there are out there for passing down your Bitcoin to who, your children or a loved one. And not enough people are talking about that and looking into it. So I think providing more information around that, as well as just like the whole Bitcoin economy. So like we have as many companies as we can list there, added there, and continue to add them. So it's good to support, small Bitcoin businesses, that are growing. So right now it's existing Bitcoiners, but eventually we want to attract the broader population. We don't want to make it too broad now, because we don't want to like have any altcoins, or we don't want to be focused on stable coins or anything like that. We want to keep it Bitcoin focused. So our kind of long-term plans is, the economy is going to grow, right? And I think Bitcoin as itself is becoming this bear asset, where if you're having most of your savings in it, then those decisions you make with that Bitcoin are going to be more and more important. I think we want to also, as part of the bridging to, like, say, the older generation that's not AI native or not Bitcoin native, is, we have ETFs on there, and we want to say, hey, like, there's some people that say only do single sig self custody, and we say that's great, but as we saw with Cold Card, some people need some hand holding to get there. So maybe start with the ETF and then start investing in DCAing, on a place like River or Unchained or Swan, and then, move to a self custody setup. So we're trying to be very like welcoming and open with where people are, and try to, have content around that.
That's amazing, because it's the same vision that we have here with the Bitcoin Libertarian, especially in the Spanish side, because we see that all around the internet there are many creators that are focused in which is the best setup for self custody, how to run a node, what is the best to run a node, and we are forgetting that probably 95% of the people of the world don't have Bitcoin. So we need to point them, and we need to help them. As you said, probably it's very difficult for a person to set up a multi-sig today. So just buy an ETF and study. You are exposed to Bitcoin, so you are going to be committed to study. And in the future, probably you will or you will not become a person with Bitcoin on self custody. But I love this vision, and I love this editorial editorial view. And talking about this, you also run the daily stack. Is a stream, is a weekly. Talk about this show.
Yeah. Continuing on from like what 21 rates is more a lot of Bitcoin financial services, and you're not always going to be bringing up like lending or cards or custody or ETFs every single day to talk about. Like, I think there's a lot of guests that we meet and things going on that we want to talk about that are broader than that. So Daily Stack's more of like our separate media side, and have enjoyed podcasting and moved, from doing more recorded podcasts into doing, into doing like live streams. It's just good to keep it fresh, and makes it come out every day, keeps you committed to like publishing at on the day that you're live, because that's when it is. But there's been a big push with that. We've seen the guys with TBPN that did the live stream and that was bought by OpenAI. And with AI itself, the technology, it's hard to fake live streams. It's hard to fake real content as it comes out. So I've always been impressed with you. I always see you on the X timeline, grinding away your live streaming. It takes a lot of work. So we're doing a Daily Stack 5 days a week, every day at 12:30 Eastern, having a mix of like market discussion. I have done a lot of AI stuff, treasury companies. Excited to announce with Pamela Posada is doing Daily Stack in Espanol. So she's been phenomenal. She's someone that we met and had on our podcast last year, and then we ran into each other at Prague and talked. And I think she has a good perspective. And what I'm learning is, I have one perspective and story, coming into this. I think some ways fortunate in the U.S. Like, just we're born with like a lot of opportunity. But that's not always going to resonate with people. Like, I didn't have a ton of money to buy Bitcoin in 2017, but I think others want to hear from someone like Pamela and from El Salvador, and why Bitcoin matters so much to her. Or on our treasury show on Thursday, Holston Valencia is my co-host, and so she's younger in Gen Z, and so she has a different perspective on why she likes Bitcoin. So trying to get away from just like the traditional, like what people expect with some like white podcaster guy that's already wealthy with a lot of Bitcoin talking down to him. Like one of the goats, like Jeff Booth, is great. If I'm somewhat have a similar story, I don't have a similar story to Jeff Booth, but like if I somewhat look like a Jeff Booth, I'm not going to compete with that. And I think it's better to be like, hey, I want to tell my story but I also want to help other people tell more interesting stories. And so I've enjoyed interviewing people, but I also want to like find, and we've, found some other good hosts that can help and take it to a different perspective. Because like you said, like there's 95% of people don't have Bitcoin, and we want to open that up to more to women. You've done an excellent job with LATAM and bring a lot of Spanish content, which there needs to be more. So I think that the next wave now is like, how do we find new creators and new voices to do that?
Yes, and also I think that people now is looking for a creator who can empathize with them. So it's not, as you said, the millionaire, like for example, Mark Moss in a fancy studio with multiple cameras, multiple screens explaining everything about. I think that now people search for this guy with opens a computer and is a person, a pleb like them, and talk about Bitcoin. One of the things that I like the most in my podcast, especially in Spanish, is bringing people who there are not the fancy creators with 100,000 followers, people with 300 followers, 500 followers on X. Everyone has something to say, and you stream every day in the Daily Stack.
Or every business day, so Monday through Friday. We take Saturday and Sunday off, thankfully.
Yeah, no, of course, every business day of Saturday and Sunday, because And the other side, you need to think about the people. Probably people on Saturday, Sunday, they want to rest. They want to stay with the family, not watching about Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin doesn't sleep. So
Yeah.
that's the point. And what is the editorial philosophy, and how do you decide what actually matters versus noise?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. It's hard coming up with titles, and I know people game the system on the algorithm a lot better than we do, like way better than we do. So that's a whole learning in itself. And sometimes you stress about it, and sometimes we're like, whatever, like just do your thing and try to be very authentic and genuine. And we've at least committed to that. But there's a lot of ways we can improve how we package things and what we talk about. I think we've seen like in the past maybe 2 months that there's a lot of people that have grown a lot over the past 2 to 3 years, just always pushing the most bullish scenario and narrative. And you know a title like, oh, BlackRock did this, Bitcoin's about to explode, everything's in all caps, and there's a bunch of guys on Twitter that get a lot of flack because they type in all caps. And after a while, I think there's a lot of fatigue with that. There's a lot of people that got burned by that. They're like, wait, you were yelling at me that Bitcoin's going to 1 million last year and the year before that and the year before that, and they're a little bit tired of it. And so I think having people that are real and more authentic, you have to keep it interesting. So like we don't have it always figured out of how to do that, and sometimes we have to play into like the sensationalism of what news is today. But I do think that like in the same way of having different perspectives and voices, kind of have to get away from like the over promising, and it's good to be bullish, but like the average person needs to know that like they shouldn't put themselves in a highly leveraged position. They shouldn't you know put themselves in a stressful position and spend money they shouldn't be spending if the timeline might be Bitcoin to 1 million in 10 years, 5 years. Like it could be a lot longer than what this podcaster, that what this person on X is trying to like grow with. So I know a lot of people have grown that way over the years. So we're trying to not overpromise in that way, and more so try to be honest and frank about what the reality.
And how do you fight? Because it happens to me in Spanish, and I think it's same for you in English. How do you try to fight to catch the YouTube attention, sending to the people this kind of content, like bullish but realistic, against all these channels that are traders, and they put the face like this in the thumbnail and said Bitcoin to 1 million, and do this thing? How do you, because I see that these channels get most of the attention, and it's sometimes I don't want to be clickbaity, but I have to be clickbaity to fight against that. How do you manage this, the bullishness, but with not over expectation?
Yeah. And I think that's a good lesson for like a lot of people getting into like any kind of being a creator is I feel like on X, we're more attuned to like they're more close to like we see what other people are doing in titles and what they're tweeting out, and then we're like, we don't want to do that. Like let's do this. And but we're interacting with people more actively in comments and tweeting at them, or they're tweeting at us. With YouTube, it's very difficult sometimes to figure out what's good for the algorithm, and you don't have I think feedback in a similar way sometimes when you're starting out. Like maybe really big channels get enough comments and they can see that, but it's hard to figure out like what do you do, and then people settle back to like, oh, I need to like just put the most absurd bullish title, Bitcoin to 1 million tomorrow, and that should do well. So I think that's where YouTube, yeah, we've struggled to like find that right balance of doing so. It's a competitive space, but I think with the marketing side, it's a good lesson for people of like, where do you invest and put your time in, and uh, long term, I don't know. Like I know YouTube's so well positioned, but I'm wondering like, do people get algo fatigue? With what they what they're being served over time, and they want to just because like people, a good example for this to make it like not just a ramble is when X moved back recently and they redid the algorithm on their end and showed you more people you actually followed. people were so happy in the Bitcoin community. They were so happy to actually be like, oh, I'm seeing my friends' tweets and you're not serving me this very divisive content. So hopefully maybe Google at some point can do that as well. It's like, oh, this is like the content that you actually chose to follow versus what we want to show you.
Yes, but at the end of the day, Google needs to sell, and more views equals more money for Google. But at the end of the day, I think that in the long term, connected with the organic traffic building, it takes more time to build a channel based on like honesty and not hype.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, is in the long run is better. I see many channels now, not only about Bitcoin. I love studying YouTube channels, especially about traveling and all the things. The people are watching more this kind of raw channel, and just a guy with a camera going, talking, showing, not fancy hotels or fancy headlines, just a guy talking with not too much edition. So I think that at the end of the day, in the long run, the no hyper hype is gonna win. And you just started the show in Spanish. Tell me about that, because we are in the Spanish community, and I think that we need more shows like this type.
Yeah. So I would give all credit. I talked to Pamela Posada about this, and we had known each other, and she'd been, committed. She'd putting out Bitcoin content every day, and someone that I think had been very passionate about it, and that came through with our conversations. So uh, I haven't I've listened to every show, but I haven't been on the shows because I don't speak Spanish, and so I'll let her run it, and she has a lot of really good ideas of how she wants to speak to women in Spanish, and maybe do some like beginner content and walkthroughs and explain what's wrong with the money from the very basics. So want to provide her with creative control to go in there, and I think it's looking at you know what's out there with the Bitcoin landscape. If the community of Bitcoin's not growing, what do we need to do to like start making interesting content that people want to subscribe to? And I think as you've seen on Bitcoin, you have people that are either sensationalist or they're really combative, like we've seen with BIP 110. We saw like with Cold Card, people really didn't like how NVK had spoken with a lot of other people in the industry, and so I think there's too much infighting. It's good. We're kind of more looking outwards of like, all right, how do we grow the pie? And I want Pamela to continue to like be creative on what she puts together.
Yeah, especially in Spanish, because the content in Spanish is either all these combative people and toxic maximalists, and people who are focused only in how to set up a node, how to set up a cold card or a cold card or any hardware wallet. And on the other side, you have all these trading gurus that talk about Bitcoin, talk about shitcoin, talk about everything. So there is no content like talk to the pleb, the person who wants
Yeah.
to start this Bitcoin journey. And the person who wants to start the Bitcoin journey, usually they end up in these trading channels. They trade money, they get leverage, and they lose all their money, because these trading channels, their only objective is to drive their audience to trading platforms that pay them. So we need more and more and more content in Spanish, educative content, because Spanish is one of the most spoken language in the world. We are almost 1 billion people native in Spanish. And I, 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 I consume a lot of content in English because I've been living abroad for more than 10 years, and I've been studying English since I was a kid. But most of the Latin American and especially Spanish community, they are very reluctant to watch content in English. So it's good to create content in Spanish. And talk me about the future. How do you see the daily stack in Spanish going in the next years, in the next months, and in the next years?
Yeah, I think like we talked about like price where it is, it's hard at the moment. So I think consistency and showing up every day, and we're figuring out a little bit of what we're doing, and then trying to be self-aware, right? I think like Avi, co-host on many shows in the podcast. He's been podcasting for a long time, and I think better speaker than I am. And so he, he recognizes too. He's like, we can't like he just had a kid. I have a kid. I'm gonna have another kid on the way, and we're like, we need to get a younger generation in here that is new and resonates with people. So I think we could continue to try to, question what's out there and say, okay, what's needed, right? Like what kind of content is needed? What type of people do we want to hear more from? Um, Very interesting on the side of like, even with treasury companies really far down, some of our best content that performs well is still treasury companies. So like we've been very like consistent with just, speaking with a lot of treasury companies, like going to the Smarter Web conference, going to Strategy World, trying to get as much of the, those communities have been great to meet and work with. The UK community around Smarter Web, and we had Scott Ellum from XCE on there on our show today. So I think we'll continue to push in the treasuries direction. We talked today with Scott just about like we need to figure out not just like amplified Bitcoin and like digital credit, but like just regular companies buying Bitcoin. Like how do we keep doing that message? So hopefully, drive in that direction as well.
Well, talking about price, we are in the middle of a bear market now. Bitcoin is moving sideways. We see 64, 62, 65. What do you think that is going to happen in the next 12 months with Bitcoin price? Of course, without being this financial advice.
Yeah. So obviously not financial advice, but I have, have been obviously talking about this a lot this week with their Bitcoin meetup. It was on Wednesday. Met up with some guys last Friday. We were talking around it. And one thing that, I did with like cold card incident happened. I moved some capital, some Bitcoin from a single sig wallet over to Ledin. So Bitcoin lender, also show sponsor. So caveat, they are a show sponsor of us. But I moved some over because I was like, Bitcoin's kind of been basing around in the low 60s for a while. It held up decently well, or has held up decently well in this range, and I think that it could drop down. But I'm getting more and more confident that maybe it goes to 58, but I'm less confident that the 40s are coming. I'm like, all right, like I think it could settle in the 50s, and I don't want to miss this window opportunity. So I'd love to like borrow against Bitcoin down in the high 50s or low 60s, buy more Bitcoin, so that I have more Bitcoin in my stack. And then at that point, I think you see by end of year, 70 or 80, well, you've already paid off all the interest on your loan, with that capital appreciation. So that's not financial advice, but like, I think being honest with the audience, like I am going to make that move and put my money where my mouth is. And like, that is actually what I'm very interested in doing like right now, because it's leverage, but it's not like leverage of like 20x that you see on different trading platforms, or even in the stock market. So I think towards like end of year, everyone's saying October, either it never plays out like people expect. So either September is going to be exciting, or things are going to be flat till November. It's going to be a little bit wonky. So I want people to be very careful if they are trading where they expect a price move to happen on a certain time. It seems like most people expect 100K return by next year, but maybe it's not till next summer. I don't know. I feel pretty safe in the 60s, high 50s, adding more to my balance sheet.
Another question, and the question I used to ask the question before that was 100K when, because was previous to the 100K of 2024. I will inaugurate today a new question that is next all-time high when.
I think a common answer is probably like, is it spring 2028? Getting into the halving. Kind of hard to argue with that. Like, I don't know. I don't know if we have enough to run up. Like Warsh, I would say this. So with Warsh and his initial press conferences, he doesn't seem like he's taking or expects to take drastic action on the Fed cutting rates in the US that could drive liquidity in the market, and Bitcoin's still so liquidity driven. I just don't know if he's going to be acting and making 50 basis point cuts at a pace that's going to be that fast. That's really going to drive it. You also have Anthropic looking at their IPO, OpenAI IPO. So those are going to pull a lot of liquidity out of the system as well. So I think it's going to be. I think for those reasons, those three reasons, that's why I would have a hard. I just don't expect it to happen 2027. But then 2028, by spring, I think we could see, I don't know, like back to all-time highs. Maybe by end of 2028, we're like 150 or 175.
Excellent. And talking about the show, what has been the most surprising conversation or guest insight that you've had on the show so far?
A nice surprise was I was walking or running in the park with my son. I ran into Bo Turner and his wife and in the park and started talking to them. And he's CEO of Abundant Minds, and Christine Maries works at Abundant Minds as well. And one of their friends, Efrat Fenixon, was visiting them, and then she came and talked at the meetup. And then she actually came by, and we did a live stream here with her in person. So I think super fascinating perspective, as we just talk about these different perspectives. And Avi that I did the podcast with is he's American, but he's Jewish. And so like he has certain perspectives on the war. And from Frat, she's Israeli and obviously Jewish. And so like her saying of like how much control the Israeli government has and how much surveillance they do, how much propaganda they do, just very interesting from her perspective, and from someone that is Israeli and grew up there and spent time there and worked there. I think it's always helpful to see other countries and situations, because it's hard, because we have our minds on our own political parties in the US, and that's how we see things. But seeing another situation is really helpful. And I'd say like the counter to that would be like something like Singapore, where we would look down as very libertarian. We would look down on the side of like how much Singaporean government, controls everything in Singapore, right? Like no guns, no gum, everyone's like very much following by the book of rules. But you don't necessarily assume they're all hate their life. Like a lot of them like the structure. Maybe they're coming from a scenario where they like that their kids are getting good educations, that their kids are safe, and maybe they came from a place that wasn't safe and their kids weren't getting education. And going to Singapore, I think twice so far has been good understanding that. So I think with Efrat, I think she was very hearing that perspective. Also, I like that she said she disagrees on the war and between Israel and Palestine with Saifuddin Ammous, but she's able to be friendly with him and then also agree with him on other points, and that she understood why that he stood or he has certain beliefs, with his perspective and his Palestinian ancestry. So I thought that was encouraging to hear that.
Yeah, let me take some points. Efrat is amazing. I met her in Lugano last year, and then in Buenos Aires. She came to be a speaker in La BitConf, the Buenos Aires Bitcoin conference, and I had her in my podcast. Plus, her birthday is the same birthday as me, so we share the same birthday with 1 year of difference. And with Safedin, I have many discussions on X because he's a big supporter of Palestine, and from this side, he hates Argentina president because Argentina president is very pro-Israel. And I'm a big supporter of Argentina president Javier Milei. And Singapore is not even close to be a libertarian country. They are more, they are like more like, they are like China. They are like China, but more open. Their government is very aligned what China is doing in mainland China. And I'm talking because I live in Hong Kong, and I was living for some few months in China, and Singapore is more close than China than a libertarian government. It's more open because of course you can transfer money in and out and you can use credit cards, but The government controls everything, but you have like freedom of and low taxes. But you can move money in and out Singapore with no problem, like in Hong Kong. Not It's not the same in China. If you want to send money to China, it's almost impossible. China is like another, not even another country, it's another planet. So when you go to China, it's like going to Mars. But yeah, Singapore is not even close to be libertarian. So that's the thing. And talking about treasuries, I don't want to go so in deep on that, but besides strategy or the big ones, what is the one that you see that is doing the better job and the most promising for the future?
Yeah, I think the easy one would be, we know the guys over at Strive, like Matt Cole, Jeff Walton, Ben Workman, like that team. They've obviously, I think, operating well. The one thing I mentioned is around like they seem to be very clear with their vision and what they want to do and consistent. And so, talking to all the guys on the team, it's like, oh, like you guys seem like very well organized in that. I think like them focusing on having no debt, having a very simple offering. It seems like strategy is even trying way more things faster than they are, and then they just find what works. The strategy is doing, and they commit to it. But it's a good people say that about like Meta and Zuckerberg right now, is that Mark waits until another team has built something, improved it in the market, and then Meta just like copies it like Threads or another product or some type of like ads product, and just rolls it out to all of their users. So I think that's in a similar way. I think like Strive just does a really good job of keeping focused, and especially that gets you through the bear market, which is huge. I think it's super interesting on like the side of like Scott Elam and XCE Group, just on the able to apply, like having a story that's not just doing digital credit and launching a publicly traded instrument. It's actually like, oh, you're there's a huge wave. There's 36 million small businesses in the US. So the market cap for small businesses, which is 349,000 average value for a small business, there's 36 million of those. It's an astronomical number. And so that is much bigger than the market cap of Bitcoin right now. Way, much, like many more times. And so getting a more consistent story like he has, saying, hey, I have a recruiting business, it's very cash flow heavy, but I pay out those in commissions. And, if I try to retire, I don't really have a good balance sheet to sell to anyone to exit the business and have a retirement. And so by stacking Bitcoin along the way, having a good system program where they can roll up other recruiting firms into it and use that cash flow to buy Bitcoin, that later becomes the equity that any of these like employees, these recruiters have, a stake of and can exit on, is, I think, really compelling story, because that model, I think, is more easily applied to a wider range of businesses. Like, think of the 36 million small businesses, a hundredth of those, one hundredth did that. It's still a huge number, right? It's very, very impactful of companies buying Bitcoin.
Excellent. And to close the show, I have two more questions for you. To close this podcast, I have two more questions for you. The first one is, how do you see the future of Bitcoin? But not the short-term future, the long future of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think like the Bitcoin, standard we just talked about, safety and moves. I think it's going to take a while before the average person is going to be building everything. I think you're going to have communities, more and more communities around, where they're in countries that are like highly inflationary, that they do need to live on a Bitcoin standard faster, because your money is an issue. I think in the US, you're not going to see that as fast. But I think you're going to have this, K-shaped economy. You're looking in the long term of who has equity in these top Mag 7 companies that the governments are now backstopping, because it's like strategic defensive, national security issue, that they need to have the most powerful AI, that warfare is going to be based on AI. And so if having the most powerful AI is the national mandate and a security measure, then they're going to be pumping those stocks up and putting so much money into it that the people that already own those are going to get really wealthy, and the people that don't own a lot of stocks are going to be poor. And that's where we've talked about UBI and the universal basic income, for people. So that's more free money going around. And in the US, you have like the Trump accounts, which it's good in a way that, I think like Robinhood accounts, essentially, that if the government invests in Intel, takes a stake, they can put, a certain percentage into each individual account holder. And for the new generation, like, it is a great thing to participate in the wealth, but I'm worried that you also have already wealthy people are just going to significantly grow more. So in that regard, they're going to elect people into power in the next cycle that are going to be, high taxation, and it's going to be also a lot of spending and programs, increases the money supply. So from there, I think you continue to see it just ramp up and ramp up, where I'm hoping that, like, with better regulation and education, that more people come around to stable coins aren't going to solve everything. It's just based on the dollar. Stable coins are also based on technology, like, Ethereum, that it's not like sound money. And I think the ultrasound money became a meme because Ethereum has not been ultrasound money. And so I think eventually getting people to come around through the resiliency, through seeing things like BIP 110, the community come back together and say, okay, it's really hard to change this ship. It's a really hard ship to change. Like, Bitcoin is pretty sturdy and resilient. I think we get to a side where it becomes, the gold, and it becomes the asset that people base on. Let's be honest with the audience, though. It's going to take longer than most people expect, than what the average podcaster has told you. So be patient, keep stacking. And like Halston and I talk about, get a job. Like, don't buy Bitcoin and expect to retire tomorrow. It's going to be a long time. Go build something cool, be a creator, make content. Even if you're building something, also make content, because you're going to need the cash flow for the near term.
Excellent. And the last question is, if you had the chance to sit down with Satoshi Nakamoto, what would you ask or say to him, to her, or to them?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I think, like, I'd be curious. Yeah, be curious on, like, what all motivated, like, if they perfect systems thinker, or did they have situations that motivated them to, like, want to create money in that same way. I think, like, I would have to ask around if the title of the paper is peer-to-peer electronic cash. Like, are we headed in the right direction with it being a store of value? Because I do lean the store of value side. I don't spend a lot of Bitcoin, and I want to have, like, I would want to understand that. I don't know if maybe he thought the tech of peer-to-peer cash would make it money, which eventually becomes store value. But I think that would help clarify a lot on the direction. And I know people go both directions in the Bitcoin community, but that's one that, like, I would want to be like, hey, like, I don't use it as peer-to-peer cash. I use it more as store value, long-term gold. And things evolve over time. People use technology in different ways than they were intended. So maybe he said, hey, I made it, and whatever happens, happens. But I have to dive into that.
Excellent. Jody, has been a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much for your time. Anything else you want to add, and how people can contact you?
Yeah, at Jody Flournoy on X, at Daily Stack HQ on X as well, or at 21 Rates HQ on X. And then every weekday, 12:30 Eastern, we're going live. Hopefully, we'll have you on either next Wednesday or the Wednesday after on Daily Stack in Espanol with Pamela Posada. And you'd be a key guest. Like, you're doing so much of the content already in Bitcoin in Spanish. And so, absolute pleasure to have you on when we can.
Looking forward to being there to talk with Pamela. I had her in my podcast twice, one in the YouTube channel that was taken down, and a few weeks ago I uploaded the episode in my channel in Spanish. So yeah, I'm open, and again, it's not a problem with the time zone because 12:30 East time is 11:30 p.m. here, so it's not 3 a.m. in the morning. So I'm okay, and I love being live because, as you said, it's more or less chic. You cannot fake the live stream. and I'm okay. So we continue talking on Telegram. Jody, thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, and talk to you soon.
Yes, enjoy your weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who is on the other side. If you like the episode, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, follow also our guest, because doing so, you help us a lot to paint the world orange. Share this episode with the people you love, share this episode with the people you hate, because we must reach 8 billion people and give them the orange pill. See you in the next episode. Stay humble, stack sats, and remember, we are all Satoshi.